Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to this review video. Earlier this week, I was contacted by Philip Sin Miniatures. He's got a new series of files coming out soon, and he said he'd be willing to give me access to the files early if I would be willing to post a small video reviewing and showcasing them. So I took a look at the samples he sent as part of his initial email, and I said, let's do it. So this new project is called Merrow Cove, and it's based in a fantasy world inhabited by the cat folk. Now, if any of you are familiar with the book or movie series Redwall, it's kind of like that, only cats instead of mice, and it's set in a small fishing village instead of a medieval abbey. Now, these models are designed to be fully compatible with one-page rules, and I think they got a fairly nice variety of some pretty unique and cool-looking units. So first, you got your basic spear infantry, which have a nice militia kind of aesthetic to them. Like there's no uniformity of the armor or the equipment, and the design seems like this great mix of cloth, leather, and metal armor. It's what you'd expect from like a ragtag band of peasants and fishermen being summoned to arms at a moment's notice. Then next you have your more elite battle line infantry. Now they still look really hodgepodge in the terms of their outfitting and equipment, but they definitely look a lot more like veterans than conscripts. Now if we move on to the files for the range support, now that brings in something that I thought was pretty unique looking at these. Instead of your ranged unit being standard bows or crossbows, these guys throw beehives. Yes, you heard that right. Beehives. And the guy at the bottom there is even kicking his soccer style. The army also has an artillery in the form of a goat ballista. Now, I'm left with a few questions, but the horns do seem to lend themselves to something being slung-shot between the two of them, so who am I to judge? The next unit in here is what I would probably classify as a scout unit. When I looked at them, they're not heavily armored. They have this nice kind of warrior monk look to them. So scouts, rangers, light but fast infantry. They've got melee weapons, ranged weapons, and a small shield. They seem like really a jack of all trades, but they're meant for speed rather than, real punch. But that's what I thought of when I looked at these guys. The hero designs I thought were pretty unique and varied. There's a wizard that gives me Final Fantasy vibes when I look at it. You've got this other hero that's a ranger sniping from a tree. You've got an assassin hiding inside of a scarecrow. And you've even got an engineer of sorts with a homemade set of wings. So a lot of different stuff to choose from here. The models for the heroes look a little bit more detailed. They have a few more bits and bobs that you'd have to paint that give them a little bit more flair and character, which I've always thought is perfectly fine for hero or character models that you're only going to paint a couple of rather than ranks and ranks of troops. Now, if we move on to this next model, every army needs a centerpiece, and so Merrow Cove is no exception. Here you've got the hero enthroned on this fishing boat being carried around in a palanquin of sorts. It's not a huge model, but it gives you the same kind of feeling as like the Triumph of St. Catherine from Sisters of Battle in 40k or Thorgrim Grudgebearer model from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And of course, the hero that's enthroned is a cat. It's the famous waving lucky cat that anyone who's been in an American Chinese restaurant will be very familiar with. So if we take a look, moving from the infantry now, let's take a look at the cavalry units. All fantasy armies need some kind of a mounted unit, though the ones for Merrow Cove are a little bit different than what you'd expect, kind of like the beehive ranged attacks. I mean, the first time I played Kings of War, and I saw dwarf cavalry riding honey badgers, I thought that was something new. Well, here you've got cats riding monkeys and wielding fishing harpoons as spears and lances. So obviously these would be great for fast cavalry. They have this really curious aesthetic of cats riding monkeys. They'd be very quick, very agile. I don't know if I'd rely on them to break the lines of Mordor, but still, it's a cool idea. Now, if we move on to the other cavalry unit, this is your heavy cav. These are cats riding gorillas. Now, if you and I were in pleasant conversation and you said you came up with the idea of cats riding gorillas, I may have thought that might not be a great idea. But look at the designs. They actually look pretty good. The riders have this cool jungle look to them that's either something you'd expect from the Aztec, or if any of you have ever played that game Dynasty Warriors, they look like the hero Meng Huo. And he comes from the southern jungle regions of China. So I'm guessing that was the aesthetic going for here, but if not, that's still what I thought of when I first saw it. Okay, last of all, we got the big boys. Most armies have some kind of titanic unit, or at the very least, some kind of monstrous creature. And in this case, you got a few options. One, there's a drunken bear. And the other is a feral saber-toothed tiger. Now, the bear is actually a part of a unit of completely hammered cats. I mean, if you look at this one over here, he's actually barfing over the ale cask. Now, that might completely sell it for you or completely turn you off, but you can't tell me it's not original. And then the saber-tooth, that's your big model. And there's no frills on it. It's a massive were-tiger in a loincloth. And when I looked at the file in Chaitu box, it was a pretty good size. By comparison, it'd be about the size of like an animated statue, a dreadnought. It's a pretty good piece. Okay, so that's the army range. And as you can see, they paint up very, very nicely. The designer has given the models enough detail to give them character, but not so much as to make painting them really involved and cumbersome. And between painting up the fur on the individual cats and the cloth and the armor, I think there's lots of opportunity to make the army as colorful as you'd want, to give it some, make it really bright, or to make the individual models still look kind of unique. I mean, you could paint all the cats the same color fur, but you could also detail the fur, give them some special looks and stuff. For you cat lovers up there, I'm sure you already have all kinds of ideas for it. Okay, now along with the army models, the bundle is also going to include terrain, buildings, and scatter terrain. It even has terrain tiles if you want to go all in and create an entire board around the theme here. Now, some of the terrain is definitely cat themed, but there are other terrain pieces that don't have any kind of really distinguishing features that would pin them to this particular setting, and so they could easily be used as terrain in other games that need forest terrain, have marshes, swamps, fishing villages, anything like that. And as far as printing the bases for the models, the bundle includes files to print both rocky and grassy bases, which I think is a pretty good idea. You have options there. So overall, I think they look good. Personally, I'm not a cat person, but I think the design is clever and it's really well executed. They have this really nice cartoony or anime look that would make them kind of a fun army, and perhaps appeal to folks who might not be as drawn to armies that are full of demons and skeletons and monsters and stuff like that. So, now that we've taken a quick peek at what these models look like, let's talk a little bit about how they could play. While I was looking at the images and the files, I was thinking in my mind about, okay, well, what kind of army book would you use to run them? So, being animals, I instantly thought, okay, well, we can take the Ratmen army book and just substitute it for a Catmen. So that would work. And then when I saw these models, they're meant to be fairly small. I thought, okay, you could also use the Halfling army book. I mean, the Halfling army book even has a unit of drunks, and that would go perfect with some of the drunken bear and the guys that follow him around here. So that would be cool. But beyond that, this bundle comes with a custom designed community army book that has special rules to make and play the army like it would play if you had an army of anthropomorphic cats. Now, do keep in mind that the army book that I saw as part of this review here was created before edition 3.2. So it might not get updated before the official release. It might, I don't know. But there is a dedicated army book that accompanies these models. You don't necessarily have to shoehorn them into one of the existing ones. So let me close now with a few technical items. These aren't necessarily negatives or cons, but they do need to be addressed here. So from what I can tell with the files that I received and was able to look at, the models aren't modular. They print as a single piece. Some people I know like to print the head, the arms, the legs, and actually build the models. They still like that aspect of it. Some people are totally fine with the idea that you print the entire model as one piece, but it doesn't look like with these you even have the option. You print them as solid pieces and that's it. Now, in the initial email communication, I was informed that when this project fully releases, there will be other weapon options for many of the units. So it's possible that that will lead to modular printing of each of these models. Then again, it could just be you print the solid model with the spear, you print the solid model with the sword, but it is good to know that there will be different weapon options when the full line finally releases. The bundle includes both STL and LYS files, but currently it looks like only the LYS files are the ones that are pre-supported. So if you use an STL file in a program like Chai2Box, you're going to have to add the supports yourself or download and work with and learn how to use the software that works with the LYS files. I would hope that by the time this is released for sale, that there are fully supported STL files as well. As far as the terrain tiles, because it looks like they're meant to be printed on a resin printer, they're only about 6 inches square. Now that's perfect for a diorama, that's perfect for Dungeons and Dragons settings, and it's good for a skirmish board. But if you wanted to print out a full 6x4 table with these, you're going to be printing a lot of tiles. And I suppose you could increase the scale and try and print it on an FDM printer, but that might mess with detail quality. So while the army can be as big as you want it to be, it looks like the board, not necessarily the terrain, but the board is designed with a smaller game setting in mind. So if, after taking a look at this and hearing what I've got to say about it, if you're interested in checking these out or any of the other projects, in the description below I put links to Philip Sinn's miniatures on My Mini Factory as well as his Facebook page, where he's got lots of other files that are perfect for one-page rules, Dungeons and Dragons, and other tabletop miniature games. And make sure you keep an eye out for the Merrow Cove Kickstarter that will be coming soon. So, until next time, keep your dice on the table, and remember, it may not be perfect, but it's good enough.